All right, here we go, yet again. Ron Carty here, Expat Club, Hotel Barracuda. It's Tuesday morning, and we've just finished our session. As always, it's my privilege to interview our speaker, Ken Hull. Ken, would you like to say hello to everybody?
Yes, hello everybody. Just giving a speech about Concorde and a few of the little things that I knew about it that's not on Google.
It was very interesting, called Chox Away, is that
Chox
right?
Away, yeah.
Actually, the first thing you start off with, the question you ask everybody, has anybody actually travelled on Concorde?
Yeah. And one person
That's
had.
right, one said, yes.
He flew on a charter flight around the Bay of Biscay.
I bet that was a surprise for you. He
Yeah,
said,
yeah. I thought, oh, well, there won't be many people, but it was a charter flight, 2-hour charter flight.
Yeah, interesting.
And they were very popular in those days.
Yeah.
And they would look on the flight deck and meet the crew and have photographs.
Yeah, fantastic. And then you spoke about your position. Now, what, have I got this right? A load chief officer.
A load sheet.
Oh, load sheet.
A load sheet is a legal document which gives all the details of the aircraft, the weight, the fuel, the landing weight, the number of passengers, all the cargo, everything about it, and most importantly, the centre of gravity.
Yeah.
The centre of gravity of the aeroplane must be between two limits, a forward limit and an aft limit. If it goes out of that limit, it will be more difficult for the captain to fly the aeroplane. But it won't allow, with the computer-based load sheets, it won't allow you to produce a load sheet if it's out of the limit. So it would be my job to move. Sometimes you could move passengers if it was a little bit, but if it was a big bit, you'd have to move freight.
Interesting. Nobody knows any of this goes on, so that was interesting. But then you started talking about Concorde in particular, but you mentioned it got banned in America, is that right?
Yeah, the introduction of Concorde was stopped. It wasn't allowed to fly into New York because they said it was a noise. But part of the problem was that they were protecting Pan Am and TWA from competition.
Yeah, of course.
But Washington allowed it to go in. So it became the route.
Oh, that's why that was the route.
Yeah.
Is that right?
But before then, it started flying to Bahrain to get used to flying passengers.
I see.
And Bahrain was an easy route, mainly over water, no problem.
Oh, well, fair enough. And something else spoke about this blooming dedicated lounge, is that right?
Yeah. Everybody that flew on Concorde.
Speciality there,
Yeah. Well, you're a VIP when you travel. You have a dedicated check-in desk. You're told to go into the lounge. The Concorde lounge only opened 90 minutes before.
Right.
So if you got there very early, you would go into the main lounge for first class passengers. Then 90 minutes before you go in, and the Fortes, the hoteliers, would have a dedicated desk for all the food, the snippets, little like champagne if you wanted it, or gin and tonic, and 6 free phones.
Oh, that's it. And you mentioned, was it Jackie Stewart, was it you mentioned?
Oh, Jackie Stewart.
That's it. Now, don't you do a Jackie Stewart on me and bloody keep talking there for another half hour.
No. Jackie Stewart used to grab a phone and nobody else could use it.
That's it.
So you had 5 phones for 98 passengers and one phone for one passenger.
Interesting, but then then you started back about Concorde. You spoke about there were 20 built.
Yeah, 20
However,
built.
it wasn't the first.
Oh no. Concorde had opposition from Russia.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
And it was Tupolev who was the man that was good at building airplanes, called the Tu-144. But when you looked at them side by side in pictures, they were identical.
So you think a little bit of sneaky peeky went on.
The press and powers that be realised that the plans had been stolen or sold to Russia.
Interesting.
And the press nicknamed it Concordski because being Russian, the ski is...
and it's funny, you spoke about a couple of crashes. It's interesting because before your talk, I never knew that there were crashes. Do you know that? I never knew for some reason.
1973 was the big one, the Paris Air Show.
Yeah, you mentioned that.
Air France took off and did their routine, and then the Russian Concorde did it.
Tried to be a bit tricky.
But the captain wanted to be one up on Air France, so he had some controls altered.
That's it.
So that he could do quick manoeuvres rather than restricted manoeuvres. But in so doing, it had altered some of the dynamics of the mechanics of the, and it put the Concorde into a dive, and they couldn't get out of it, and it crashed.
Yeah, interesting. And then, as I say, I started looking because for those that know, at the beginning of all of our expat clubs, I try and add a little bit of humour in relation to the speaker. And I searched Concorde, and all that came up was about these Germans, the French killing a load of Germans in a hotel. So I couldn't talk about that one. But anyway, but then look, you spoke out in, what was it, 2003? It stopped flying.
Yeah, it stopped flying because the Air France Concorde took off.
Yeah.
I forget what year it was, but about 96, I think. And it flew over a piece of metal which had been dropped by a previous aeroplane. The metal flipped up, burst the tyre, and the tyre flicked a huge piece of rubber at the fuel tank.
Interesting.
And put a hole in it. And that, the heat of everything there ignited the fuel.
Right.
And woof, as it took off, you saw this sheet of flame come out.
Yeah.
And all they could do was take off, turn and land. But before they could land, it was out of control. Down it went. 109 dead on board. And 4 in the building.
Yes.
Very sad.
So was that the main reason why they stopped?
Oh yes, so they had to stop it to understand what went wrong.
Yeah.
And then they came up with the idea of fitting the tanks with Kevlar.
Okay, you mentioned
which, but they didn't fit it in all the tanks, only the tanks near the wheel.
Right.
But they only the underside, didn't do the top. It's just where there might be something that would hit. But they introduced it, and there wasn't much call for Concorde because at the time I think you had 9/11, and there was just a downturn in the economy, and people weren't flying, so British Airways and Air France decided to stop.
Yeah, so they're on display everywhere all around the world now.
I don't know what happened to the Air France Concordes, but the British ones, there's one at London, I know, there's one at Seattle, one at New York, there's one at Bridgetown, Barbados, and I think there's one at Manchester.
Interesting.
And people can go and look at them, and I think the one in Barbados, you can actually go on it, but I'm not sure.
Interesting. But then, and then you finish off with a couple of stories. You start off with the hat, what I'd like to call the hat story. Is that right?
I forgot to mention it in the talk, but Concorde stretches 10 to 12 inches in flight because of the heat that is generated by flying through the air at Mach 2. But it's got to come back again at some point. So on the very last flight, the flight engineer decided that he was put his hat on the floor in the gap. And as it closed, it jammed his hat in, and his hat will stay there forevermore.
And it's still there, so you can see that hat.
I don't know which one it was. So to be fair, I'd have to get on Google to look at that.
Yeah, and then you spoke about the Pepsi story.
Oh yeah.
Not too long now because we only got a little bit of time.
Pepsi, they hired Concorde, or leased Concorde, from Air France. British Airways didn't want to do it, so Pepsi wanted to launch their new product, blue instead of red, so they used Concorde. They wanted to paint it blue, that caused the problem, but they were eventually allowed to paint it blue, but only the fuselage. Right. Took 2,000 hours to paint it with 200 litres of paint.
Unreal. And did sales go up, you know?
I don't. Oh, they reckoned it was a flop. The whole thing was a flop.
It would have been.
It cost 500 million.
Unreal.
To do it, and
you got to sell a lot of Pepsi.
It restricted the flight.
It would have done.
Yeah, they couldn't fly it fully out because it would heat the aircraft and heat the fuel. So it would fly Mach 2 for 20 minutes, and then it had to come down to 1.7 times the speed of sound.
Interesting, eh?
Whichever it was. Let's say 1,000 miles an hour.
But that's another example of poor marketing. But anyway, so that was a hat story, the pep story, and then you spoke about the cello, what I call the cello story.
There's one passenger I never got to meet, but there was a Russian cellist called Rostropovich, and he had a cello, a Stradivarius cello, very expensive, 300 years old, and he wouldn't let it out of his sight, which is, and it was insured for 3.5 million.
Whoa.
So he would buy 2 seats,
would he?
full price, for him and the cello.
Is that right?
The cello was strapped in the seat.
Fantastic, eh? But really, but listen, very, very interesting talk. Look, and it's my privilege to give you your certificate.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
So you can put that on your next to the photo of the Concorde or whatever. It's on your wall,
my 36 years in British Airways retirement.
Oh, bloody brilliant. Okay, so bloody congratulations. All right, thank you very much. We'll get you back again.
It was a pleasure to come here, but I was a little bit nervous in doing it.
It didn't show.
There we go.
It didn't show. So listen, so here we are again. To everybody watching, come along, Expat Club every Tuesday. Camaraderie, breakfast, speakers, interesting. See you next Tuesday.
Okay, bye-bye everybody.